Okay then, so hi everyone. Welcome to this Hatch webinar. Thanks for taking the time to join Jack and I today. Really appreciate it, and I'm certain that we'll repay the time that you've given us by us sharing some interesting thoughts that can add some value to your social media campaigns moving forwards. The calendar invite for this says that it will take an hour. I promise you that it definitely won't. It's absolutely gorgeous outside, and I probably, just like you, wouldn't mind getting outside and stretching my legs, maybe soak up a bit of that sun. So I hope that we can get through the presentation to you in around about 30 minutes or so, maybe a little bit less, and then we'll have some time at the end to answer any questions that you do have. We'll do that in the end. So if you do have any questions at any point, there's a Q&A button at the bottom. Just pop them in there or in the chat if you can't find that, and we'll go through them. If you don't have any questions today, but you might have some at a later point, or if you're watching this on demand because it is being recorded, then just find us on Twitter or any of the socials, and we'll do our best to answer them. So to give you a little bit of an introduction to who we are, my name's Brett Cullen. I'm the head of social and content here at Hatch. I've been at Hatch for a little over 5 years, but my life in digital PR and brand goes back over a decade. I remember my first steps into social media professionally were way back when you had something called like gates on Facebook pages. You could even build iframes within tabs for little games. And probably the most interesting bit was that you actually saw everything from everyone in chronological order. So I'm sure you'd agree it was a much simpler time. Jack, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, I'm Jack. I'm social media lead here at Hatch. I've not been working in social media quite as long as Brett, although I do remember those sort of busy days of Facebook. But yeah, I've been working for about 7 years. I sort of cut my teeth in brands such as Jet2.com, Pizza Express, and now working sort of brands like Rugby League World Cup to deliver cutting edge campaign and creative.
So yeah, if you need to ask us any questions at any point after this, our Twitter handles are there. So if you're wondering who Hatch are or what we are, we're a social content PR and event agency based in Leeds and London. I'm in our Leeds office today. Jack is in our London office, but we work on clients locally, regionally, nationally, and globally. We actually have a team of 38 now. So I suppose the first failure from me today is the fact that it says 35 team members, but so slightly out of date there. But yeah, we've worked with and still do work with some incredible clients of different scales, and I'd like to think we do a really good job. Even pick up an award or two along the way. Of course, that's not the be all and end all, but it's definitely a good night out at least. So we have 4 mantras. The first of which is our tagline of delivering the unorthodox. This is really about not being restricted by constraints of the way things have always been, particularly true for our social and content team, because we're big believers that you struggle to stand out when you do the same thing. So you should be trying to do things a little bit differently. As we're Yorkshire at heart, well, I'm a proud Mancunian, but I suppose the agency's Yorkshire at heart. We're big believers in budget-conscious creativity. Essentially, it shouldn't cost the earth for great ideas and execution. We think we're strategically diverse, and that's because we think not one size fits all. Obviously, with the topic of today's webinar, with what we're talking about, it's not a strict process. There's always flexibility, and strategies should be suited to the specific problems that our business face. And finally, we're commercially driven because we're obsessed about delivering value, essentially, probably too obsessive. We want to get results not just for our own benefit, but we want as partners to deliver commercial results that clients want, and not just so what numbers. So today, and what we're talking about today, is the topic of how to maintain engagement following a social media campaign launch. Some of you watching this may work in social directly, either agency or client side, or you may have it as part of your marketing mix and you just want to know how to get the most out of social. Whatever the situation is, I'm sure you can all remember one time when you've launched a new product to market, or you've prepped for a key sales moment for yourself or for the category, and you've been super pumped and focused to make it a massive success, only for it to not quite hit the mark that you wanted it to, leaving you scratching your head as to why that may be, and surely there's a better way. You spent so much time and effort, and probably a fair amount of internal and external resource costing you good money too, creating what looks like a good launch plan. You've got your idea about how you want to generate the success that you want. You've maybe panicked a bit and had a bit of those last minute anxiety and nerves about whether it'll work, but you're ultimately dead chuffed and excited to see your efforts come to fruition. So launch day comes, the assets you've made all look great and the world can see them. You've even written some really good, funny and punny copy to go with it. And, we're live and look, we're actually getting what we wanted to get out of it too. There's a bit of buzz. People are talking about you. You've got some traffic through to your websites, and you've possibly even secured some sales too. So overall, a really decent launch day. Probably go home, open that bottle of wine, make a cup of tea, relax, go to bed happy, and just think about the same again happening tomorrow. Only it doesn't. The same thing doesn't happen. The world's moved on. You've spent all your money. You're done. Campaign's over, and you realize that you've peaked and there's not much else you can do, and you just have to shrug your shoulders and say that didn't go to plan. But wouldn't it be a better story if things went a little bit differently, where something like your plan becomes a little bit more strategic, and you've planned so well that you thought about not just that launch day, but the before and the after bit, and everything still goes swimmingly on launch day, maybe even better than the first story that I've just ran through. But crucially, there's many more chapters to the story, so that when you wake up the next day, the success continues, and then it happens again the next day, or a week later, or 2 weeks later. It's a bit like an anti-Groundhog Day, really. I think that sounds to me like a much better story. The problem that could happen, or sadly you may have already experienced it, is that you've got a good product that people want, or a good service that people need. You've got a good campaign idea that you think people will see and it'll resonate with them. But unfortunately, you've just not got a good enough plan. You've peaked too early and you couldn't recover. The solution is actually relatively simple. You keep the good product and you keep the good campaign idea. You just plan a bit better. You should create that hype. You should still have that really strong launch, but you extend the campaign with good, strong momentum. That's what gives you the success that you not just get on launch day or whatever this key date is in your calendar. But importantly, it doesn't stop there. It carries on beyond that date. So let's talk about how we put that into action, and the question of where do we start? Well, it's about planning properly, first of all. And that's three things to that. There's getting your planning basics right. There's thinking about getting your strategy right. And then there's implementing or executing it right. So the first thing we'll cover is the planning basics, which are the principles for any campaign, really. A lot of this will be stuff that you probably already know. But from Hatch's point of view, we always try and replicate classical brand planning or marketing strategy generally, because we think that that's the best approach for creating a social media campaign too, rather than it having a siloed idea that really jars with the way that you're thinking and working and maybe presenting back to the other senior people in the business. Of course, we're not going to go into all of this today, nor are we showing you how we do a complete social media strategy, but we just want to give you an idea of what has to be done first in terms of that planning basics. So we obviously start with objectives and insights in our diagnosis stage. For objectives, we'll clearly have smart objectives for the social media campaign. But the important part there is that it always has to ladder up to the wider business goals and objectives. We want to know really what the business needs to achieve so that we can set targets for what the social media campaign has to do. Then we should move into insights, which at a minimum is obviously the audience insight. And by that, we mean going beyond demographics to look and dig a bit deeper into the consumer's wants and needs and their goals, etc. And also we'd ideally want insights from culture, which is an absolutely massive part of the momentum of campaigns, but generally it's a massive part of getting insights is what's happening culturally so that it can be relevant. We want insights on competitors or the category and the company itself so that we can get really immersed into it. And all of this diagnosis is crucial to then move on to that bit in the middle, the strategy piece. A long story short on this is we like to dig into those business and consumer problems, use the insights and then plan an approach that should allow us to win. Moving on, when implementing our tactical approach, we want to look at things like what platforms or channels we'll use, what are the executions on the campaigns, what are the other tactics in the campaign, and actually what are the messages that we're saying. And for the different audiences, the different audience might take on board a different message depending on the different phases that they're in of their journey. And then, of course, how are they communicated? Finally, we're at measurement, and yes, this is listed at the end, but for making sure that a campaign has momentum, it's actually an ongoing process. Did it, or are we doing a good job? What can we learn and change, not just for future campaigns, which is what I suppose traditional reporting would be about, but how can we improve the effectiveness of the campaign that we're in? And once you've done all this, you should have a fairly good plan in place. So I want to dig into an element, the strategy, specifically around how we maintain engagement following a social media campaign launch. And that's around having 3 campaign phases, which I've sort of briefly mentioned in passing already. And those 3 phases are hype, launch, and momentum. Hype is our pre-launch period. It's our tease, or in some cases, even our pre-tease. Who doesn't want that? We want to build hype for whatever we're launching on whatever the day or moment is. We want to build interest and intrigue. The next phase that we move into is the launch. Clearly, this is where we'll anticipate we'll have our biggest impact and where our major hero campaign assets, which we'll talk about shortly, will be distributed. And we'll hopefully start seeing those first results come through. And then the final phase is the piece that the failed story that I mentioned just misses, and that's the momentum. We don't want to let the campaign crash. That's where we'll be telling more stories, and we'll tell them in different ways. We'll have more to go at, basically, at this bit. It's important that we maintain the interest with those people that we've already engaged with, but also bring in more awareness from new people as well, those who missed the initial hype and the launch phases and never saw us initially. If we didn't have and carry on that momentum, we'd just completely miss them all. So 3 phases: hype, which is the before, launch, which is the during, and the momentum, which is after.
Awesome. So moving on to the implementation, so we're doing all that. Just again, 3 more things here. So 3 things to consider. And the first of that is our channel ecosystem. And this is just recognizing that our customers are everywhere. And when we say customers, we don't mean the people who are buying the products and sort of the people who are sort of the core audience, but we mean potential buyers too. They are everywhere. Now, we've listed some channels here. You can see Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, and others. But there are so many more that we couldn't fit onto this sort of nice little wheel. You've got your YouTube, Snapchat, WhatsApp, Pinterest, and other often forgotten channels like Twitch and Reddit. And then you need to factor in other channels like email and TV, etc. Now, your audience's time is going to be split across all of these channels and platforms. And when they are there on those platforms, they're going to be split into different formats too. For example, Instagram. If you're not on the feed, you'll be on Reels or Stories or Live and more. So for the scale you need for success, you can't really rely on just one or two of these platforms. You've got to consider the full ecosystem that covers the various touch points where your customers are. And the big question is how will you use them to your advantage to solve the needs of the business and the customer in all three stages of the campaign? Secondly, we've got a content hierarchy. Now, this is a structure that allows us to build content outputs that we need across all three of those phases that Brett talked about, and not be blinkered by one piece of hero content, which can often happen during campaigns. You absolutely can have that piece of hero content that's going to drive that bigger fame and create that emotional connection with your audience. But the question is, how do you stretch that to give sort of further assets across all three of those phases? If you want to pick up on that, Brett?
Yeah, so we break it down by stories and always on. So the stories, not necessarily the story placement, although it can be that, but that's just about easier consumption. It's shorter formats, basically. And then the always on pieces, which is just a label to help us basically recognize that these are our assets, which are probably static images, which are very heavy with your distinctive brand assets and your cues. So for an example, you've more than likely gone big with your hero piece on launch day. Also on launch day, you've probably pushed out a few of those story pieces on different platforms. Could be a story, it could be a pre-roll ad or whatever it is on a Facebook video. And there's a potential there to retarget the people that have engaged with those, with the always on pieces that push the brand further. So as you carry on into the momentum or even beyond the campaign, you're just pushing the brand further forward to build that salience with them. So the point here is that you've not just got your hero, but from that hero asset, you can break it up into smaller chunks that give you more tools to go with for your distribution plan.
Awesome. And then finally, the last of the three, the quick timings. Now, we've pulled out sort of an indicative timings plan here. And as you can see, right in the middle, we've got these huge circles. And we've pulled out those three elements Brett talked about: the hype, the launch, and then the momentum. Now, as you can see, we all know the launch is going to probably be the biggest moment, as you can see by the biggest red circle. You see either side of those, that sort of hype and momentum phase are also quite big too. So failing to sort of plan and tease that a little bit out, or failing to sort of get that momentum, you're missing out on two huge potential chunks of sort of moments that you can reach your audience and share your content with them.
So there's lots of things that we must do in each of those phases to be successful. We're going to talk about each phase in slightly more detail now. So during the hype phase, there's lots of things we want to do here. It's obviously important that we build a strong brand identity. For bigger brands, this is obviously much easier than it is for smaller ones, which is why we think it's important to be distinctive and to do things differently. Naturally, we want to create a bit of desire and anticipation or craving, particularly if we talk about food and drink, for what we're launching to. We're wanting to be prepping for discovery commerce. In other words, that's the idea that we're always shopping today, that we can bring people into the path to purchase and convert them much more quickly, presenting them with a solution to what they need when they're not even shopping for it in the traditional sense, as we're supposedly always shopping with this idea. In the hype phase, it's a time when we can identify and create those target audiences. Yes, we'll have identified them already during the diagnosis phase, and we'll have actually already built some audience within social channels for that. But that's when we can start testing and start building those custom audiences even more. And from that, we can learn how to optimize our platforms and our channels and our creative placements and formats, so that when it comes to launch day, we'll have hopefully learned some good lessons during the hype phase that we can put into action to improve effectiveness. So it's not just about the hype in the traditional sense of getting everyone excited, but it's actually giving you a lot more knowledge to be more effective when it comes to launch. So that launch piece is relatively simple, really. You'll have already done this in your problem stories anyway, and it's quite straightforward to understand. We've got our hero content piece that goes live, and we've given that a significant distribution push. And clearly, launch day has been identified for a reason. Either it's a key moment for your brand, or your category, or culturally. For example, you've got cultural big moments such as a Black Friday or a Christmas scenario, but your category may have slightly different key moments, such as, you know, it's a peak period for buying pet food or whatever, or it's just you've just identified for your moment that's when you're going to launch a new brand of trainers or whatever. So we go big here, and we reference our content hierarchy, because we'll also be looking to use those other formats, such as the stories. We may be utilizing the remarketing for those creative elements. So we're looking at a blend of both the brand and the performance marketing here, with a bit more weighting to the performance stage, because naturally you're probably looking to get some conversions going. So then we're on to our momentum phase. And as mentioned, this is all about staying relevant beyond that key moment. That's where we're looking to re-engage with new and existing customers or potential customers with content that will be of value to them. And again, we're wanting to use remarketing to push them down that funnel. And what we're actually serving them, the content that we're pushing out is more stories, essentially. We're not just relying on that hero asset and loading everything into that and hoping that does our job, but we've got the stories and the always on pieces from that hierarchy. In other words, the content that's slightly different messaging or different assets and different formats that are used on different platforms. You might have your hero piece that goes on your hero platform, but where else? Remember those touch points where people are. That hero piece has made that big emotional connection at launch, but maintaining momentum is about carrying on that relevance. We want to bring it to even more people into that funnel, or move the people that are already on the journey but haven't quite been convinced to purchase yet further down it. And the final part about maintaining momentum is what I've just talked about a little bit earlier, is where we get iterative and we make live changes. We're constantly looking to be continuously learning and optimizing what we do. And by that, we mean we're looking at the creatives we used, from having a look about whether the videos perform better than the statics, do the animations perform better than the live action stuff? Is there a length of time that works better in different positions? Or is it the copy that needs to be changed? Do they differ across different audience segmentations? Is our media spend needs to be different? Do we get more success depending on what success looks like for going after a particular segment? That's where we're constantly looking to improve that efficiency and ultimately our effectiveness.
Cool. So what we thought we'd do is we give you a real life example how this has been implemented in the sort of campaign that we've worked with, which was the Rugby League World Cup. And this moment was, with 1 year to go to the Rugby League World Cup, we were tasked with launching the Rugby League World Cup's first ever ticket ballot. Obviously, we knew we had a moment for launch day, and we knew what we needed to do, which was raise awareness, as well as converting that awareness into ballot applications. So if we move on to the first of the three phases that we've spoken through, hype. Now, in the run-up to the ballot launching, we knew we needed to do a few things. So one of that was to educate our audience. So with the content we went out with, we need to let them know what was a ticket ballot. For a lot of the core audience and sports fans who were going after this, wasn't something they were particularly used to. So we knew that we needed to create content, whether that was still images, graphics, or animations, where they could learn about what the ticket ballot was and how they could get involved. The second element there is the countdown, and this is, again, building that hype, sort of quite literally. Again, this could have been anything from Simple graphics, which was just one day until 1 year to go, 1 day until the ballot opens. And it could also be things like utilising existing footage we had of game day moments, thinking about what is it that's going to sort of entice the audience or entice our customer to want to buy a ticket. And if for them it's things like, I want to go and watch some exciting rugby league, then we need to provide them with that, give them that reason to be excited, whether that's a big hit or a great try. And thirdly, is our audience identification. I've mentioned them very slightly there, but we knew that we had two key audiences. One of them was our core rugby league audience. Now, these are people that go to club games regularly. They'll be at Leeds Rhinos or Salford Devils. And we know they've got a good knowledge of the game. And the second one was our big eventer. And a big eventer is someone who loves to go out. So they'll be at concerts, they'll be at the Commonwealth Games, they'll be at the Women's Euros that we might have seen over the summer. And they just want to be there for the action. They've heard about sort of these going to be huge crowds, there's going to be a lot of fun, and they want to be there. So knowing these two things, we could tailor our content to ensure that the visuals, the copy would match their expectations. And the second phase is the launch phase. As we mentioned in our sort of content hierarchy, our hero piece of content was quite an emotive video. We worked with a poet to create a brand new poem for the Rugby League World Cup, which after a few months of lockdown that we'd experienced before was all about bringing people together to enjoy rugby league and to enjoy sport. Now this went out first thing in the morning and had spend put behind it as well to make sure that we were reaching those two audiences that we mentioned. Secondly was our channel strategy. Now, we knew that there were going to be certain channels which were going to sort of take up a lot more of our content through the day, and certain channels which there'll be less content output on. So for example, Facebook, we didn't want to spam that with lots and lots and lots of content through the day. So we carefully chose, okay, we'll have our launch video, and then through the day we'll have key moments where we share content. Twitter, on the other hand, was going to be one where we were able to sort of post more content through the day as the news cycle changed. And finally, channel strategy doesn't just have to include your owned channels. For this example, as you can see on the right, we worked with our host stakeholders to help light up landmarks in their city purple, the colour of the Rugby League World Cup. Now, this helped us increase our reach. These content went out on our host channels as well as our own. And it also sort of gave us initial content, more content, for our channels. So for you, this could be stakeholders for your business or stakeholders for your brand, but it could also be things like content creators and influencers, whereby you're creating social content, but it doesn't have to sit on your channels, and that can form part of your channel strategy. And then finally, we've got our sort of stories and always on. On top of the emotive hero video, we knew that they were going to sort of need more content through the day. So we pulled out certain elements of that. So we shared the actual poem that was featured in the video as sort of a written piece of text. We also managed to get it up on Manchester's biggest billboard and shared content around that. So we had a look at what that hero content was, and we figured out, okay, where are the little bits we can take from that, take little snippets and push them out to create more content through the day. Awesome. And then finally, our momentum. Now, the first bit is paid social. It's absolutely fine that maybe after your launch day, you're also going to tail off a bit, and paid social is a brilliant way just to ensure that that key messaging and that key content that you're after is going to reach those audiences after that initial sort of explosion on launch day. So we did that through, again, putting money behind that hero asset. It's sort of a huge thing, and it's taken a lot of resource and time. So we want to make sure that it was seen by as many people as possible. So after launch day, we carried that on, targeting people, and also key bits of content that performed well on launch day. As Brett mentioned, sort of that testing and measuring. If we've seen that that had performed well, then we put a little bit more spend behind it to, again, just extend that shelf life for the content. Secondly, and more sort of organic rather than paid, was milestones. As part of a ticket ballot, we want to celebrate every single milestone and success. So once we'd had, 50,000 people sign up for the ballot, we shared that, and we let people know that's a moment to celebrate. And it gets people even more excited, I guess, knowing that 50,000 people have signed up. I need to sign up too, otherwise I'm going to risk not being able to get my tickets. So have a look, figure out what those milestones are. What are those moments that you can celebrate and share after that launch event? Thirdly, fan engagement. And this time splits between sort of our launch and momentum actually. For something like a ticket ballot, we knew that there were going to be a lot of questions from customers, a lot of questions from fans about sort of how they could access it, sort of frequently asked questions. So we made sure that we had a stockpile of answers and that we were engaging with fans in Facebook comments, on Twitter. We were doing social listening to see if people had asked questions and not tagged us correctly, but just make sure that our customers, our fans had exactly the information they needed to be able to join our ballot. And then finally, more stories. Again, taking that hero content and sort of figuring out what are those additional little bits that we can do. Can we retarget the people who watch 25% of our hero video with a little snippet of one of the big hits that was featured in that, or one of the great tries that was featured, again, just to sort of keep them on that journey with us. So, yeah, as I said, that's it. If you've got any questions, then yeah, we'd love to sort of to take those. If not, you've got our details there. You can get in touch with us either at Hatch or our Twitter or our email addresses. But if you need anything, then yeah, stick it in the Q&A or the chat function now, and we'll get around to that.
Yeah, I was absolutely having a mare there coming off mute, if you wondered why I was just staring at the screen. Yeah, any questions that come through, pop them in. And we'll answer them. It's not a problem. I suppose the other thing to add from what Jack was saying there is that is one case study and one example that we've put in there. There are others that we've got. If you're interested in looking at those, it's not a problem. There is one question that's come in from Michael. If there's one pitfall that happens way too often, what would you say that it is? I'll answer first on that. In the context of having campaigns that don't have momentum, it's just a case of it's a planning issue, really. There's a lot of focus on creating one big moment, which is absolutely fine. And that could be having one big asset, which is great. Don't know what it is. You'll have your own vision in your head of what that asset may be. But it costs a lot of time and money to do that. Everyone has scaling budgets, but if it is a key moment for you, then you've invested time within it. You focus so much on creating this one thing for one purpose, and you land it. And yes, it could have success, but you've got nothing else to go off. You are leaving yourself short and just invested all that time and effort for one thing, and you never know. For example, the day could get washed away for something on the agenda which changes things, or people just aren't ready to buy yet, or people aren't even heard of you, and the asset that you go with just doesn't do the job. It'd be much better if you invested time on something and then thought, how else could this be used that give you longevity to a campaign, so that you can not just carry on momentum from this one particular audience set, but get more people in as well. If you were to look at the phases of a customer journey in terms of they've not even heard of you, they don't even want your products, and then there's other people that have heard of you and are considering it, and there's ones that have heard of you and actually do want to buy. All of them are different motivations, and you've got nothing to go at for them because you've just created one thing at one time and one moment. You just need to give yourself more in the tank to go with, so that you can carry on for a sustained period and keep on appearing in people's feeds, be it organically or paid, and push people down, really. So yeah, the short answer is just a lack of planning, really.
Yeah, I just to add to that, I think from the perspective of a campaign which actually on that launch day sort of has gone really well, and you're really pleased. And Brett mentioned earlier, you go home and you'll sort of open a bottle of wine and you'll sort of sit on the sofa and think, oh, that's great. I think it's almost that little bit of complacency, because it's the momentum that's really where sort of you're going to find those results and really drive those results home, in terms of the ones that are sort of going to be meaningful to your brand or business. So I think it's about just, even in the planning phase, seeing this as sort of 3 really distinct phases and knowing that, okay, launch day has gone really well and be absolutely happy with that. I think that's amazing, but there's more work to go.
Yep. So as we mentioned, these are our details. So if you've got any more questions, just send them through at any point. Thanks for your time. I did aim for 30 minutes, it's 36. So not bad. And yeah, look out for more webinars from Hatch soon.